There's my
long
water.
questions.
Yeah.
Just give me a 3-part question.
I'm just going to go across the panel here, so don't worry too much about all this. For the second, Claire, are you happy to say something new about yourself in the intros, and then we'll come this way? Yeah, they said they'll do it automatically, so. All right. Oh, yes, the microphone is on. Kia ora koutou, no mai, haere mai. Thank you for joining the panel. And I just want to acknowledge that everything in the auditorium is being recorded. So some of the whānau, don't leave because I said that, but some of the whānau have gone to, Hannah. Have gone to other workshops knowing that they'll be able to see that later. Thank you for joining us here at the State of the Nation panel. We have an esteemed panel joining us who all bring different perspectives around the reality for our rangatahi in Aotearoa and for our sector. So today we've got a few questions that everybody's going to get a chance to answer, and we are also using the Slido function that is on your app on your phone. Now, what they didn't mention is if you're like me and thought I could do the app on my phone and then couldn't, you're welcome to go to the staff in the red shirts that helped you register, and they'll help you get the app on your phone. But when you go onto your phone, there's a Slido app there, and if you have any partai for our panellists, pop it in the Slido. Then you'll probably be aware that you're able to see the other questions people have asked, and you can upvote them. So if somebody else asked a question that you'd really love an answer to, you get to kind of upvote that. And usually the most favourite questions win. Although Aisling, who is over there, has the ultimate power. And so if your question doesn't get there, you can ask her why. So yeah, that's the proceedings for today. Thanks again for coming along. Otherwise, it would have been a really fun chat with the five of us on the stage. We're really keen to hear a little bit about each of you as panellists, a little bit about your story that's kind of brought you to here. And we're going to start with somebody everybody in the room knows, who's already introduced herself. So our Children's Commissioner for Aotearoa New Zealand, Claire Achmad, tell us about you. Woo!
Oh, kia ora whānau, and lovely to see you all. I've already shared a bit about myself, but I thought maybe I'd just share. I mentioned in my pepeha that I was born on the lands of Te Kawerau Maki, which is in beautiful West Tāmaki Makaurau. So I'm a proud daughter of West Auckland. I was in a real rush to come into the world, so I was born at home. And that is really my heart place, my Ngāko place in the Waitakere Ranges. It's the place that I feel most tau, and the place that I always try and get back to and have my feet on the whenua and just enjoy being in the ngahere that really replenishes me and fills me up. And I was really shaped by my childhood growing up. I went to school at Avondale College in central West Auckland, and there I was part of Te Puna Aroha, our Māori ropu, our Māori class, and I had the privilege of learning from some amazing kaiako throughout all of my years of high school. Tikanga me te reo Māori, which will always be an ongoing learning journey for me, but I was very much shaped by that time and that place and those people. So that's a little bit more about me.
Kia ora, Claire, that's awesome. Next on our panel, we have Arena Williams, who holds the youth portfolio within the Labour Party and is an MP for Manuira. Kia ora, tell us about you.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Claire, I didn't know that about you, and there's a beautiful thing that happens in these sorts of panels where we get to share our story and we learn a little bit more about each other, which is that whakawhanaungatanga that we do so well in Aotearoa of telling each other about why we are here and why we get out of bed in the morning. And for me, I am very lucky to call Manurewa home. It is a beautiful place in South Auckland. Hands up if you are from South Auckland and in the house today. Yeehaw! Thank you for being here and part of this. But my mother is also from Te Waipounamu. She is a proud Rakiura girl from the deep south. So the Ngaitahu blood is in my veins, keeping me warm today in the cold, frozen wastes of Christchurch. I come from a family who have always been political. Many of you will have shared that sort of upbringing, which brings you to the sector today. Where from a young age, when I was a teenager, I was taught that sitting around the Sunday on a Sunday afternoon in my kitchen bench with my father, who was a counsellor, and my mother, who was a local GP, was a place where people could come to our home and talk about the issues that they faced, whether it was something with the local playground or whether it was a health issue that was affecting them intergenerationally in their whānau. That was my parents' calling, and we absolutely lived by a sense of service to our community, and many of you will share that. Mine comes from a place of faith. My father is a rangatu minister, and my mum, a long-time advocate and campaigner for women's health, women's rights. She got involved in the Labour Party when she was a teenager and has since then campaigned for women's access to contraception, which started here in the University of Canterbury. And, for me, it looked like getting involved in politics at school and then university, and I was studying the law. And there was this moment where I was 23 years old. I had almost finished my law degree, and I was going into a summer job as a corrections officer. And I get this call at about 11 o'clock, and I'm sitting in my very cold flat from my auntie. And she says to me, your nephew is at the police station, and I need you to figure out what it is that we can do for him to support him. Because at that point I was the closest thing in my whānau, that part of my whānau which is from the East Coast in my dad's side, to a lawyer that they had and trusted and could ring up at that time of night. And I figured out that what had happened is my nephew had been going home from kapahaka practice. He was at that time very young and the male leader of his rōpū, and they had been practicing because they had qualified for Te Matatini, and they were so proud of him at this point. And he had had this experience of being pulled over with his mates in the car, and because he was the leader, that when their vehicle was searched and utensils were found in the car for drug use, he had said, "It was me. It was definitely me." And my auntie was calling me because what I didn't know at the time is they had passed him when he was at the police station a piece of paper with some information about what he was being charged with. And my nephew is one of the many young men in New Zealand who had been through the school system and hadn't at that point learned to read in a functional way that he could understand what he was being charged with. There was something that went through my head there as I was spending about 90 minutes figuring this out, where I actually realised that I wasn't equipped to deal with this, and that the best thing I could do was to help him to access someone who could, but also that this system had failed in so many ways to see one of our young men sitting across the table, admitting to everything and something which he had very little part in. And a system where that took away from him a year's worth of being able to lead in his kapahaka rōpū, which is, the proudest part of his life and his family's access to the arts stage. So that is definitely something that has changed the way that I think about our law and the way that it works for people, and something which motivated me to get involved and to be able to be in a position to change that for some of the people who our system is failing on a daily basis like him.
Kia ora e hoa. Ironically, I remember being about 23 in my final year of law school doing youth work and having one of my rangatahi ring me with almost a really similar situation. So that's cool. Whakawhanaungatanga. Our next panellist is a good friend of O Tuatahi. His title currently is Someone Grown by the People in the Room, Josiah Tualamali'i.
Oh, tēnā koe e hoa. Malo lava le sufua. Nai tuahururi tēnā koe e hunga mate ki tunga mate haere tunga ora. Ko vai te maunga ko wali ma te awa Aotearoa whitu wha whitu tō waka, specifically my dad there. No Otapoti ahau, where we grew up, ko Otautahi e noho ana, oranga tangata, oranga whānau, tōku mahi, ko Josiah Tavi te tōku ingoa. It's so lovely to be with you all here and to be in our city. For those of you who are visiting, whawhatau for coming, awhio mai for being here in Otautahi. As you've said, Jane, I feel that the reason I'm on this panel is because I've been grown by the people in the room. And maybe just to quickly get to that. First, being born in Dunedin, this is my dad. Dad, actually, would you just stand up for a minute and give everyone a wave so they can see you? Or not, if you don't want to. But this is my dad. Yeah. Thanks for being here, Dad. Dad grew up in Samoa, and at 17 he moved to Aotearoa and ended up, after a little bit of time in Tāmaki in Auckland and Dunedin, and then met my mum and had me and my brothers. And in that house where my nana and my mum and my dad, we were all living together, my parents and my nana taught me to sing. And I think that was, as Matoruru was talking about, where does leadership begin, or where does that opportunity to get in there? And for me it was music, and it still is. That's my anchor. And then, so that's our family part. And then at school, teachers and people pulled me forward and would just sort of say, you don't need to be behind the video camera or in some of the tech roles. We'd love you to be on the stage, and acting and stuff helped me kind of come forward and not be on the sidelines so much. And as I was going through school, there was a leadership opportunity, a program 15 years ago here in Christchurch to grow Pacific youth leadership. Our elders had said, and it was supported by Pesata Sam Lotuinga, who was Minister for Pacific Peoples at the time, and our elders in the government said, we need a different future, and currently Pacific young leaders aren't that visible in what's going on. And so we're going to create a space, and that at that point, 15 years ago, I was 14 years old. The application to get in, you needed to be 16. They let me in, they relaxed the rules, and I guess it just makes me think how often, with the rigid definitions that we're in, do we keep pushing back and say, actually, if a young person's ready, that's what the decision is, not so much about what the age rules are, and we can keep them safe and all of those things. And then the other part was they made me the Prime Minister of the Pacific Youth Parliament that we're in, which was probably not the right thing to do in one way, to give a 14-year-old, to put you in that role of a 16 to 24-year-old leadership program. But they knew that I had the people around me to make it work, and I guess that's what our sector's done and has kept doing for me over the years. And since then, I've had the privilege to be on boards. My roles are in governance, so supporting our organisations to lead well, to hopefully serve and meet the needs. And then I've been a panel member of the Government Inquiry into Mental Health and Addiction, and in 2018, and I will talk more about that around the youth justice, mahi maybe later, and then recently just finished with Dr. Claire as one of the children's commissioners, and I guess just to say thank you to you all. It's been the greatest privilege that, for the people in the room or wider, have grown me to have, as I understand it, one of our first children's commissioners who comes from a youth development background specifically. And I think that that's another thing we should be thinking about. Who are we growing and how are we growing the next waves for the key roles we need our sector to be holding to protect and support mokopuna. Yeah, kia ora.
Ngā mihi kia koe. So the final member of our panel is the MP for Banks Peninsula. And a whole lot of other things it says on my paper that you can tell us about. So I'm pleased to welcome to the panel Vanessa Weenink, the MP that I already said.
Kia ora koutou, tēnei te mihi nui kia koutou, hioi mai nei tēnei rā. It's really great to be here today and thank you for the invitation. So being the MP for Banks Peninsula is a really cool job, and I feel like everything that I've done in my work and life has really led me up to doing this role. So I grew up in a tiny little place called Canvastown, which is halfway between Blenheim and Nelson. In the classic kind of 1980s way, pretty much running wild and swimming in the rivers and, looking for wild kura and, just had a great time running free. And I went to Bahawley Intermediate and Marlborough Girls College. I was the deputy head girl of Marlborough Girls College, and I thought I was pretty great. Yeah, I thought I was awesome. And then I went to med school in Otago, and while I was there, I joined the Otago University Medical Company, which is an army unit, and then I became a medical officer cadet. And after I graduated, I worked for a couple of years and then went into the army full-time. And during that time, I deployed twice to Afghanistan and once to East Timor. And then I worked in general practice for a bit, about 10 years, became a leader in general practice, and then went into politics. And pretty much here I find myself, but I've had that history and that sort of service mentality my whole life. Always wanted to serve my country. I remember a great mentor of mine who was a professor actually at Auckland Medical School and also in occupational dive medicine that I was doing a course in. Anyway, he said to me, "Do you really think you're serving your country the best that you can by being a doctor in the army?" And then I thought, well, actually, probably right. I should go and do general practice in the real world. So I did that. And then I've always asked myself, are you actually serving your country the best that you could be? And for now, I think that I am serving my country the best that I can. I've got the privilege of being on the Economic Development, Science and Innovation Select Committee as the Deputy Chair. And up until yesterday, I've been the acting chair of the Education and Workforce Select Committee. Only because the chair is on maternity leave, and then the deputy chair had to go on paternity leave. It's never happened before, so we were kind of making history. So I have a lot of reasons for where that drive came from, but I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that I just feel very, very privileged to have had such an awesome childhood in such a fantastic country. I was raised as an Anglican, and Anglicans have got this deep service thing that goes deep into our soul. And just really grateful for the opportunities, really grateful to have such an incredible community to represent, and really glad to be here.
Kia ora e hoa. What a great panel. Can we have a round of applause for the panel? Yeah. Nice. Hey, so we're going to hear from each of our panellists now, and for around about 5 minutes each, and there's 3 parts to the question. So we're asking each of them, what are the most pressing issues for young people right now? What solutions do you see? And what is the role of youth development in this solution? So 3 parts to the question. I'm going to start with the youngest, and then we're not making any judgments about who goes next. So Josiah, would you like to kick us off?
Yep, kia ora. I've got sort of 4 things I think are the most pressing issues, and probably more on the some of them are immediate, but they're connected to some longer term things, I suppose. So the first thing I think is we know more rangatahi, more taihohi, more young people are experiencing deep challenges right now. The second one is around the hardening of hearts that's going on in our communities from my perspective. I think the third one is the opportunity to raise our next phase. And the fourth one is addressing inadequate protections. So in terms of the more rangatahi and challenge, I guess we know about the challenges on the streets with the homelessness needs that are increasing, the job losses, particularly those who are Māori and Pacific right now, who through different economic challenges are being more challenged than they have been. That we heard already about the inadequate youth wage, the youth worker wage, and so I guess I think the rangatahi and challenge comes back to the view of what our country is about. And to me, at the moment, we're too focused on the economy, and we're much too focused on economic productivity. And the best thing that we as a youth development sector do and can do is keep pushing that the whole person, the whole young person, is the most important thing. And their village, their interdependent village that they're part of, is the most important thing. And whatever happens and whatever government at whatever point in time and whatever leadership we're in, that principle will always mean that we have a place to play and make a difference. So I think we need to move from more rangatahi and challenge to challenging to enable better for rangatahi. And the second around the hardening of hearts. I mean, I know we feel the pain that particularly our youth justice colleagues work amongst. And I've got some more I want to say about that in a minute, but we need to better understand as a country what mercy means. And it's not weakness. As we know about what it is to develop someone when they're younger and to give them the chance to learn about it, was what it is like to be in life and to experience things and make decisions and make mistakes and then keep growing from that. We need to open the hearts, and we're the sector that does that every day. So we're keeping on that. To the inadequate protections, in 2014 we had an independent panel which looked at alcohol in our country, and particularly alcohol sponsorship of sport. And there has been calls and calls and calls over every year since then, an independent panel after independent panel, including mine when we were the Mental Health and Addictions Inquiry. Alcohol is the most hurtful and impactful drug in New Zealand, and we aren't dealing with that the way that we deal with other addictions and other addiction needs. And so it's time, it's absolutely time, if not now, today, hopefully before this next election, someone will have the courage to ban alcohol sponsorship of sport. And I've talked to New Zealand Rugby and others, and they're not doing it at the moment. It doesn't matter how many times we've asked. We actually need the law to help protect our rangatahi, because our players can't be socialising the harm that we are trying to prevent and that our sector deals with. There's also the voting rights of prisoners, including young people, that are being undermined, and those absolutely must not be removed. I've got another story to share about that in a minute, about what I've learned about visiting prisons. But yeah, so from inadequate protections to the protections that enable the mana of all people. And then the last one is raising our next phase. As has been said, it's Cook Islands Language Week, and it's also 60 years of the Cook Island community being in free association with New Zealand. And the Cook Island leaders I know have this special thing, and I'm not telling you anything I'm not supposed to, because they talk about it openly, but they've got this plan called Cook Islands World Domination, CIWD. And I kind of wonder, because CIWD, a couple of years ago, they had the governor of the Reserve Bank, they had the chair of Creative New Zealand, they had all these very senior roles across the community and leadership that the Cook Islands community had grown, being a very small country in some ways, but obviously having the heart and the uwhi that's needed for all. So I guess what's our equivalent of CIWD? And I think we should look at 2040 and think about our plan now as a youth development sector to get ready for 2040, our 200th birthday as a country, and intentionally growing the leadership that gets us through, because we have, and it's one of our superpowers.
Kia ora. Awesome. We're going to keep moving across the panel. So, Arina, what are your thoughts around those three questions?
So good, Josiah. What a way to start this discussion about the state of the nation, about where we are as a country, and then looking forward to 2040, when we are hopefully all together at Waitangi or beaming in and talking about this country that we are so proud of, that a country that has grown from a colonial past to moving towards something which celebrates everyone, which is looking forward to the next 200 years of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and that document is part of the fabric of our law and the way that we do things. That we've moved past this debate about how we should think about the principles of the Te Tiriti o Waitangi and into how does this enable all of us to be together, to have the kind of social cohesion that we can be proud of, where people know their place and celebrate their place, and it's grounded in a history of being together well. Because I think that is where we can get to. We need a little bit of a course correction now, though. There are three things that I've been thinking about in my work as youth spokesperson for the Labour Party. The first thing is we've got to get a handle on this joblessness. Youth unemployment statistics were out yesterday. 10% of 20 to 24-year-olds are in that category of looking for jobs or looking for training. And for teenagers, that is a much worse picture. It's 1 in 4, and it's not spread evenly. You're right to say that Māori and Pacific young people are bearing the brunt of the choices around the economy at the moment, where they are either voting with their feet and leaving. They're part of the 47,000 New Zealanders who left last year to go to somewhere like Australia. We're paying for Perth and Queensland's building sector at the moment with our apprentices, and it is not working in the long-term interests of Aotearoa. We need to arrest that decline urgently, and it is a problem which government can and should fix. We're also thinking about the way that youth homelessness is increasingly becoming an issue for our cities, our towns, and our regions. Places like Gisborne are also seeing this exponential rise in young people with precarious housing and not being able to rely on somewhere to sleep tonight, let alone in a couple of months. Why is that a big problem for our economy, and why should we be thinking about that as a productivity problem? Is because, for the young woman that I met in my electorate at the beginning of this year, she is 16 years old, she'll be 17 years old now. Her name is KJ, and for the first time in that year, she had slept at a bus stop overnight. When our amazing youth transitional housing provider opened up for applications for 2 available spots that it had in its Ihumātao facility, 350 applicants who were eligible were applying for the same spots as she was. She was very lucky to be able to get a place, not there, but in another housing facility. But there are still 348 young people who, between the ages of 15 and 20 are eligible for those spots and desperately need that support to be in a living situation when they're on their own, or they're without an adult who can stand behind them. Instead of addressing that, we've seen more policy rhetoric coming from the government where they are going to cut off the 18 and 19-year-olds from job seeker benefits and require them to show that they don't have a parent to stand behind them. So we're taking this kind of reactionary approach to the older teenagers without that supportive approach that the 15 and 16-year-olds like her need to be able to get into training, get into work, and be able to support themselves. It is a problem in an economic sense because of the way that investment in her life we will be forever paying for more and more interventions for someone like her if we can't help her to do the things that she needs now to get on the right track. That supported, safe, warm, dry housing for her and now her baby will mean, a huge investment up front in her life and her wellness, where we won't have to be spending more further down the line to be able to support her as she grows older. It should be a no-brainer under the government's social investment approach, but for anyone who knows about how our communities work and how we support each other, it's also really important for somewhere like South Auckland where we need her community to be able to support her. We need those social links between her and her whānau that are under constant and toxic pressure because of the way that she has missed out on essentially these housing and job opportunities. The third one that I've been thinking about is the way young people's health is being impacted by change in technology and change in expectations around work. As work gets more and more precarious, and we see the rise of basically gig economy here in New Zealand, and we're placing more and more expectations on young people to be flexible and to, say, take on 90-day trials in their work, or for young people to come with higher and higher levels of qualifications that they have gotten through their education into what 10 years ago might have been a job where you were able to learn on the job, and where they're facing more and more stress in their housing situations, and it's more common to have a sort of precarious housing arrangement if you're under the age of 25. We're seeing just this huge erosion of people's resilience and ability to get up in the morning and feel that they have hope for their lives, and it's leading to this real crisis, I think, for us as a country that we are not grappling with yet around not only mental health but a broader sense of wellness. And I think what you've said about mental health and addictions is bang on. Making sure that we are dealing with the whole person and where they're at in a non-judgmental way in our clinical system is critical. We need more of that work around alcohol, but also the rising problem for us now is gambling, where we've seen an ACT minister introduce very permissive legislation which will see more advertising of gambling. The kids are all right these days. This is actually one of the most socially conservative generations of New Zealanders ever. Young people are engaging in less risky sex, less drinking, less drugs, but gambling is going up and up and up. 1 in 3 teenagers are engaged in some form of online gambling, and yet we have recently seen the passing of legislation which would see more of this and more government-sanctioned advertising of gambling to younger people. So this is a thing that we really need to take action on, and when we talk about addictions and the way that they are impacting our mental health, we cannot ignore the front end, which is how people are accessing that. And you're quite right about sport. It's something that we should continue to press out on and continue to find ways of funding those sports organisations that rely on that funding in ways like the South Auckland and counties teams have done, where the DHBs were able to come in with funding to replace what was alcohol funding and help them get other deals like car deals.
Kia ora. Awesome. So we're going to move to you, Vanessa. What are you seeing for young people at the moment and the role of the sector?
Can I just ask, are we still going in age order?
No comment.
I don't think we can be. Thanks so much. So there's a huge number of challenges, as Josiah and Arana have mentioned. I think for me, one of the things that stands out, again, partly from my experience in general practice, but also just with talking with constituents, is the mental health challenges that we see in our community. We see a huge number of young people suffering with anxiety and depression, and I think also struggling to access specialist mental health services for things like addictions, but also for neurodiversity through ADHD, autistic type traits, and learning difficulties. So yeah, I think that's a really big issue, and it affects, it rolls into and crosses over with the job market, which is also the other thing that I think is a big challenge at the moment. And we talked about the statistics for younger people, and it really reminds me of when I was your age in the 90s. It kind of feels a lot like that. There was a really high youth unemployment. We were going through a bit of an economic downturn, and really it took a while to climb out of that, and it was a darkish time. And so I see us having to work towards that. And whilst I agree that we have to focus on why we want to improve the economy, and I think that talk about the economy and improving it we can lose that focus of why we're doing it, and why we're doing it is for the advancement of our people, so people can live better lives, so people can thrive, so that we can have great communities where people feel connected and involved and included. I think that focusing for young people, access to those services that can improve things through the youth mental health services are really important, and we're doing what we can to boost that. And one example was the boost for Gumboot Friday, which allowed another 20,000 extra consultations for youth mental health services. but also growing that into other organisations that can also level up and provide more services, really important. When it comes to ADHD diagnosis, we changed the way that people can access diagnosis. So from 1st of January next year, nurses and GPs will be able to do the initial prescribing and diagnosing for ADHD, which is quite a big step forward. It's been about 20 years in the making for that one. So those are helpful things. Also doing what we can to do wraparound services for the younger people who find themselves without jobs. So about 2,100 people initially supported to have all of the services that they can. And I saw how these services can work really well as a GP, being able to refer people through directly to those providers who then helped with everything that needed to be done, whether it be literacy courses or getting driver's licenses, really practical things about getting medications and just getting housing and things sorted. I think, talking about housing, it is a huge focus for our government, because we know that if you've got stable housing, that means you're connected with the community. It means you're much more likely to be able to get the education that you need, much more likely to end up in work. So a huge focus for us is to be able to get as many people eventually to either be in rental or ideally to be able to one day own your own homes. That's something that, like, my son is 20, and the thought that he might never be able to own his own home is not acceptable to me. We need to change the job market so that we can improve the economy and reduce the reliance that our whole economy has on the price of houses. And youth development work to support youth is absolutely vital. Really grateful to everyone for all the work that you do to help look after our rangatahi and help to develop them into the wonderful people they are. And it's a huge opportunity that we have to pour more into it, and that's where our social investment approach really can help, because, like Arane said, the more we put in up front, the better, and it's because it's the right thing to do, and also it makes economic sense to invest in people. So I'm proud to be part of a government who is doing the practical things that we can to do that for people.
Kia ora. I'll be shocked if there's not some questions about Gumboot Friday on the Slido. Yes, I'm getting a nod from Aisling, so we'll continue with the panel so we can get to Slido for you. Claire.
Oh, kia ora, Jane, mo ēnei pātai. My start point when I'm thinking about pātai like these is always, what do I hear directly from mokopuna, from Taiohi themselves? When I started in my role, that was my central commitment that I stated publicly to the country, that I would always ground my advocacy in what it is that I hear directly from mokopuna, their lived experience, and to amplify those things. So that's what I'll do today in answering your pātai. So in terms of the biggest challenges, I think about three particular things in this regard. The first one being the barriers, inequities and exclusion that too many of our young people experience every single day in communities up and down this country. And I see that playing out for too many of our mokopuna Māori, too many of our mokopuna Pacific, for many of those who have been in or who are in our state care and youth justice systems, and also for our mokopuna whaikaha and our rainbow mokopuna as well. Those inequities and those that lack of inclusion, genuine inclusion for all of these mokopuna, it has a detrimental effect in their lives now, but I think what we don't pay enough attention to is the ripple effects across lifetimes and the intergenerational impacts that is having for too many of our mokopuna. And what I hear from young people a lot around the country, they are often surprised when I'm very genuine in listening to them and being curious about them and their lives. And they say to me, it's not many people who I actually get that from, you know, and often when I've shared my voice, it hasn't necessarily been heard or given that whakamana that every single mokopuna in this country should experience when they share their whakaaro, when they speak their truth. The second key challenge that I think about here is the impact of poverty and that is having on the lives of our young people in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It is completely unacceptable that right now we have 156,000 mokopuna who live in material hardship in our country, and that's going without 6 or more of the very basic items that no child or family should want for their child, should have to worry about not having. And the ripple effects again of poverty in the lives of our youngest, it is having a really, really negative impact. And it's within our control to actually address poverty. And so I really continue to advocate to the government and to successive governments and for commitment across our parliament to really put a central focus on ending child poverty in this country a project of national significance. You know, if we're serious about cherishing and nurturing and respecting our youngest, then we should start there. And then the third big challenge that I see, and sadly that I, in this role, see all too often on a weekly basis and am spoken to about frequently, is the impact of abuse and harm and violence in the lives of our young ones. And recently we just completed a project where we have heard from a number of mokopuna around the motu who are healing from family and or sexual violence. And something that really stood out to me in that project is that a lot of those young people have shared that it was often on the 3rd or 4th time that they sought help that they were finally listened to and taken seriously. So right there, I think that shows a place where we can actually start to find solutions, which is to genuinely respect and value and treasure and nurture our young people. That is the start point, I think, for our solutions. I also think that we need to be investing far more in the first 2,000 days of all children's lives, because those are the foundational building blocks for everything that comes afterwards. And I think as well, I would like to see our policies and our investments focus more on investing in families and whānau, recognising that when they thrive, children and young people thrive as well. So I think that's crucial. And then I would also like to see us really lean into a solution that genuinely involves children and young people in building the solutions and making the decisions that affect their lives. Because what they tell me is that they want to be participating in things like their education, but often there are too many barriers in the way for various reasons at a systemic level. So I think that's key for solutions. And then when it comes to the role of the youth development sector in addressing some of these challenges, for me, it really comes back to what I shared earlier on in the morning. It is about staying the course and being alongside our young people in genuine relationship and remaining in those relationships through the ups and downs, being curious, always remaining curious, and being comfortable to sit in that silence that we all know sometimes is there when we're with taiohi, but just remaining in those moments and seeing where the kōrero ends up flowing. I think that is very powerful in and of itself. And then I think as well that the youth development sector, you, as I said earlier too, are a very strong collective. And I think sometimes you underestimate your collective power and impact and the importance of your voice and the solutions that you see as the village around taiohi. So I would just encourage that you keep that collective voice strong and loud and lean into, I guess, that collective advocacy around the issues that you see as well.
Kia ora. That was a fantastic overview across the panel of some of the things that are really real right now for our rangatahi. I'm going to throw a curveball at the panel because I'm conscious of time and I really want to get to Slido, but I know that my next question is some of the questions that are on Slido. So, but I'm going to halve your time. So you have 2 minutes each. And instead of asking our MPs, tell us about all your priorities for the youth development sector in the next election, leading into the next election, could you give us your top priority that you see for the youth development sector from your political position?
I think the most urgent and important lever that government should be pulling right now is to address the huge number of young people who are looking for work and looking for training opportunities. Things like cutting the apprenticeship boost, which was unexpected. Since the election, Chris Luxon promised that he would continue apprenticeship boost because it got young people who, for some, had not been through the school system, but they needed a practical and hands-on way to get into learning, that he was going to keep that, but it has come off and we're only seeing 1 year of that now funded. That's a mistake. In this kind of economic downturn, these things should be counter-cyclical, and so we should see more training opportunities for young people like that. Things like Jobs for Nature, where it was practical, hands-on learning in the taiao with people who had the greatest stake in looking after their communities, streams, their rivers, their ngahere. That was a really important policy, and I want to turn that back on, because any of you who are dealing with rangatahi at the moment, feeling that sense of hopelessness and that disconnection from the communities that we're seeing, you know that one way we could intervene in this cycle that leads to that kind of thinking and that kind of disconnect is if they had somewhere to go in the morning where they could see themselves learning and getting ahead for themselves, something they have to put on their CV, something they can talk about with pride with their whānau. That is one step, and that is government's job, as far as I'm concerned.
Kia ora, awesome. And for yourself, Vanessa?
Kia ora. I would say it's education. So we're doing a lot of work in the education sector to improve from the beginning, early childhood and in primary schools, improving the literacy rates and numeracy rates of our children, and also we're reforming the vocational education training system, this is vitally important. We need to make sure that there are plenty of pathways for people who want to learn, either go down an academic route or go through a vocational way, doing multiple different levels of education, whether that be at a polytech or doing it online training, whether it's on-the-job training in an apprenticeship, making sure that all of those things are connected and that it works well for the learners, and making sure that it's connected to the jobs that people can hope to get in the future as well. So making sure that industry is connected to those roles as well. We need to keep pushing in every way that we can to advance our country, and education is the great way of levelling up. Certainly from my own experience, I mean, I had a pretty basic upbringing, I would say. My mother was a solo mother, and my dad had been in prison, and so going to school and improving my education and becoming a doctor was my way of advancing in life, really. Without an education, I could see myself of being quite a different life trajectory. So I think it can be that for anyone if they have the right opportunities and have people who believe in them at the right times. And for me, I had some fantastic teachers at my public school, at Marlborough Girls College, who encouraged me.
Deputy head girl?
Yeah. I had great mentors along the way, and I think that's where we need to invest, is in our students and our young people.
Kia ora. Matsuaruru was talking earlier as well about how many of the people in this room have been so impacted by the youth development teachers, youth workers, etc. in their lives. Yeah, beautiful. Claire, you've already shared a little bit about the amazing work that Mana Mokopuna are doing in child rights. We also know, because we do a lot of work together, that youth voice is a really important part of that. Do you want to share a little bit about that when you think about where we're heading?
Yeah, so as you've already got a sense, I'm probably one of the biggest cheerleaders for youth voice and participation. And that is the case because I champion the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, so I want to see us as a country really uphold our duties and obligations under that convention that we ratified in 1993. It sets out 42 basic minimum rights for all mokopuna in this country, and one of them is Article 12, the right to participate in decisions and matters that affect children and young people in their lives. And so this concept of youth voice is very important, but I always like to emphasise that it's predicated on participation and genuine participation. And so in our mahi, under our legislation that we're governed by, we have a particular section in our Act, one of my favourite sections, that is all about mokopuna participation and voice. And so we really do champion that very strongly. And some of the ways that we do that, we undertake specific projects with mokopuna to hear their voices. Over the past year and a half, we've published 3 reports, mokopuna voice reports, that present and publish mokopuna voices unfiltered on the big kaupapa that affect their lives, always to highlight lived experience as well as solutions. And we've got some copies of those reports down at our stall in the exhibition space. And the 3 kaupapa have been the first one around racism and solutions to end racism, the life course and what mokopuna need at different stages of their life course according to them, and then the third one that I mentioned earlier, mokopuna experiences of healing from family and or sexual violence. And so in my work as the independent advocate, I always am amplifying those reports, taking them into the beehive whenever I meet with ministers across the government, with the Prime Minister, highlighting the solutions that mokopuna themselves have identified in those reports, because there are so many practical solutions that if we implement them, they will make a real difference in their lives. And then 2 other quick things to mention. One is that wherever possible, I am leaning into sharing my platform with mokopuna themselves in the advocacy space. And so showing up to select committees and sharing submissions together with mokopuna themselves. So on the Treaty Principles Bill, I had Anaru alongside me, a care experienced Māori mokopuna who spoke incredibly powerfully from his perspective. And recently we were before the Education and Workforce Committee on the Education and Training Act. I was there with Denise and Soraya, 2 rangatahi from Martin in the Rangatike region. And again, they shared so powerfully from their lived experience, their advocacy directly into those decision makers. So I think that's a really important approach. And then the last thing is that I recognise that our mokopuna, our taiohi here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, are so creative, but often they're not always supported to express themselves in those creative ways that they want to, such as through art, poetry, rap, spoken word, different kinds of expressions. So me and the team, we're leaning into a new approach called Te Puna Hononga, which will see us going deep with mokopuna in some different rohe around the motu, and creating and facilitating ways for mokopuna to express their moemoeā out to 2040, that key milestone of 200 years of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and what they dream of and what they vision for their future Aotearoa New Zealand.
Kia ora. One of the things I love the most about youth development, whether it's in justice, education, health, wherever, is that our youth development practitioners, our bread and butter is youth voice. You know, like it's so natural to what we do. And I love the work of Mana Mokopuna and how we're looking to kind of combine forces really so that their voice can be amplified even more. Josiah's already foreshadowed his pātai. So do you want to tell us some of your thoughts, particularly around rangatahi in the justice system?
Yes, please. So I got to go to 5 prisons for the first time in 2018. I'd never been to a prison before. As a very young child, I thought that, harder would make it clearer that change is needed, and harsher punishments would be what make a difference for people. But what I saw that year, the screaming in some of the cells, the rooms that didn't get sunlight, some of just the basic needs that weren't being met for some of the people there, and that somehow these young people in these prisons and all people in our prisons seem sometimes quite far away from and what they have to go through. It's sort of, and then meeting a young person who had his glasses taken from him because they were red, and obviously gang colours. There was some worries about that, but as a glasses wearer, I could immediately tell and knew from talking to him that his headaches were because his glasses he just needed the lenses swapped out with a new pair of frames. But sometimes I think there's these bits that aren't necessarily moving fast enough for those small wins that are needed, just to help that mokopuna be able to see, to then also not have the headaches. That was not a big thing for the system, but it is a big thing for him. And so that was something that, and then he and some other rangatahi told me that in those visits, not being able to afford to live led to my offending. And there are good parts of our lives. So I guess I think of what they told me in those visits, and just let's keep amplifying that there is hope even in prison, even in our youth residences for the rangatahi there, that they are, and many of them live quality lives, and they're only living in the challenge that we as a wider society have created. If anything, they're holding the challenge that they've inherited. And so that's why I'm hoping that we had a petition just before I became a Children's Commissioner around, and then I stepped away, and Marlon, he might be in the room, he picked it up, but just around that we need Parliament to work together around best practice interventions for youth justice. We need, like other countries, to have an apolitical space where we get to what will be the real driver of the solution, and it be less punitive and more supportive, because there is time to intervene, there is time to support. And probably the other two things. One is I'm concerned, and for us as a sector where we have our election next year, and that's really good. It's important we have our elections every 3 years, but our independent advocate, our Children's Commissioner's term ends in 1 year's time, and that is in the lead up to an election. Why is it that our children's advocate and our children won't necessarily have a chance to get to know their chief advocate in the lead up to an election? I just think it's constitutionally improper, but more than that, it's just our mokopuna deserve a chance to know who's helping them. And if we have a new Children's Commissioner in the lead up to the election, when that could be a month or two after that, I think that dishonours that they can't vote, and this whole work that we're doing on youth participation is undermined, and particularly those in the youth justice space who need someone that they know and can actually reach out to. And so I'm not saying this with any prompt from Claire. This is just my own sense of, and I've spoken to the Minister of Social Development, and through their officials, I've tried many ways to raise it. This is something that should not have happened. It's not something our sector should be inheriting. But I just mention that here as if that's something that others in the room want to work on, amplifying that we must change to protect mokopuna voice through the next election. I'd love to work with you on it.
It's such a good point, and can I come in on this? I really admire what you said about the hardening of hearts, which you're seeing playing out, and it is so directly related to how we treat our justice system and how politicians think about these roles which are meant to safeguard that and be sort of kaitiaki and stewards of a system which is not meant to be political. And I think that's a real risk that we have to be alive to, and good on you for raising, the term, and I'm keen to look into how that would be changed, because it goes back to that exact point, the hardening of hearts, when people feel like they're in a squeezed middle, where they are being oppressed, where it is hard to get on top of the cost of living, where they're seeing rising joblessness where they haven't before, where their housing costs are more than they have been before, and you get this kind of middle class, and whether it's in the US where there has been this massive turning to economic populism into Trump, or whether it's in the UK and this kind of disengagement from our democratic process, or whether it's in Europe with the rise of the alt-right. These are all things which New Zealand's democratic process is not immune to, and it is because people are feeling that pressure and like they need to punch down. We have to resist that, because it will come for our youth justice. It will come for our schools. It will be in our curriculum. It will be everywhere if people in this room don't stand up to it. And we need to make sure that there are safeguards around how we deal with these processes, which should not be up to the political vagaries of who can vote and when.
Kia ora. I'm going to grab the Slido questions. They're going to magically appear across the stage. This is Aisling. She's our comms and advocacy person at Arataiahi. And she did all the work behind the scenes to make this panel happen. Awesome. And now I'm going to see how good her writing is. This is for Claire and the MPs. I'm really conscious I want to get through at least 3 questions, so if we can just be really succinct with our answers, whānau. Takatapui and rangatahi are experiencing harm due to the actions of the government, gender affirming care and RSE. How can we uphold their mana?
That is a problem. There is a real need for the National Party's elected Prime Minister to stand up to the plumbing of the depths for votes by the 2 minor parties who are using especially the healthcare of trans kids to win votes. That should not be something that's political. National wasn't elected on that platform. They need to show leadership on this.
And I'm very happy to add on that. So we have made submissions that are publicly available on both of these issues, advocating for puberty blocker treatment to remain available through clinical guidance and support. Gender affirming healthcare is a human right for our mokopuna, and so check out our submission on that, and we continue to advocate into those spaces around that issue. And when it comes to relationships and sexuality education, my very strong view on that is that we need to ensure that mokopuna are receiving appropriate relationship guidance and modelling of healthy relationships from their earliest years, and that needs to continue throughout childhood and adolescence. We only need to look at the issues that we have in this country around family violence, around sexual violence, to know that we've got a huge opportunity that we must take up to make real intergenerational change on this kaupapa, and one of the key parts of the puzzle in terms of solution is strong relationships and sexuality education.
Kia ora, Vanessa.
Thank you very much. So one of the things that I think is misunderstood is that prescribing for puberty blockers needs to be done by people who know what they're doing, who understand the potential harms, as well as being able to support people with it. When I was a GP, that was one of the things that I did quite a lot of. So I it was a special interest of mine to support people through transition, but not every GP is like that. And so it's really important that those who are prescribing are supported to do that, and that's what it's about. That's what's happening, is much more clear guidelines have been introduced to support general practitioners, especially, to be able to do more of the prescribing. So that is, it has to be with people who are what we call vocationally registered. So that might be narrowing the field a little bit for some, but actually what it's doing is supporting a workforce to be more specialised in that work. So I think that's actually a positive thing. It's about educating those who are in the roles, making sure that there is better access to all of the supports that are needed, and that is for medications that have long-lasting impacts and that should be carefully prescribed. So I think that understanding that that's the approach, it's not turning off supply or access. It's actually about making sure that those who are supporting people are actually the best that they can be at doing that.
I suspect there's some whānau in the room that would love to continue that conversation. Are you hanging around until lunchtime?
No, I have another appointment at 1 o'clock, so I'll be gone, sorry.
Okie dokie. Rightio. Well, we'll see. They might harangue you on your way out the door, but we'll
Happy
let
to
you
be
walk the gauntlet. Upholding the mana of our takatapui and rangatahi in the rainbow community feels like it's something that we all should be united on. So.
Agreed.
I also want to ask another question of you, Vanessa. You're quite popular.
Oh, no.
How can backbenchers like yourself support the voices of survivors of abuse in care?
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, this has been one of the most devastating and difficult things as a politician was to read some of the case studies of things that have happened and that still occurred, like you say. It's just been absolutely appalling. As a backbencher, we're available to listen and support people, if possible, to help them to find the right support if they haven't already connected with it. That's really what we do in our communities and with our constituents. In terms of what we can do within a caucus and government, you'd be surprised how little we can do. There is quite a strong hierarchy within politics, and I would say that one of the downfalls of the New Zealand political system is that we, as backbenchers across the House in all parts of the political spectrum, don't have much of a voice within our parties. And I think that that was possibly one of the downfalls of the last Labour government, and it's a weakness everywhere. And so, yeah, not much we can do.
Seems to be a call for constitutional reform, if I ever heard one.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's a really good question, and it is a moral failing of governments of the past that we have not come to this reckoning point that the Royal Commission brought us to earlier. And want to acknowledge everyone who participated in that Royal Commission. It was a harrowing process, and anyone who gave evidence to that is brave and has done some really important work in the way that we should be acknowledging that history and what is happening now. This is still happening. We must, as MPs, continue to advocate for people who are care experienced within their access to housing and their access to services. We're not going far enough now. Things like the restrictions on the ages of people who have been care experienced who then have access to the services like the special housing supports that are out there now. Many of you will be helping in this room with people who don't qualify for that because they weren't care experienced after the age of 14. We are getting some of these settings wrong and we are continuing to do harm. We have to continue to stick up for it as MPs, and everyone who has any power in this system can see that we are not addressing this ethical failing.
These partai are so great, Vano, because they are all issues that we should be united on, yeah? That just seem to be across government, no matter what. Again, for yourself, and this is our last partai whānau, Gumboot Friday. Is Gumboot Friday, or supporting the movement, the best way to, I think, address inequality? Isn't it better to have evidence-based funding?
So I think the really important thing is that is only one of many ways that that funding gets directed.
Can I interrupt, which is really rude when you're the person on my side? I think a lot of people in the room would say that was significantly funded, and we've seen closing of many, many services that are evidence-backed, that are supporting the rangatahi.
Well, I think the challenge is very real. The evidence that we've looked at the moment is about who has been able to access and how many people have been able to access. We were very clear that it was about ensuring that there were more people that could access a number of services, and that is unfortunately one of the only ways that any of our services are evidence-based. There's very little in terms of outcome measures that are used for any health services, frankly, especially any mental health services. So in terms of numbers of access is one of the cruder, but one of the only ways that we have of measuring success. That's the only way that we've looked at things like the Mana Ake program as well, as how many people have been accessing that. The same with the Access and Choice program. That again was only measured on people's, basically on the numbers who've been put through. The only other measure that they've had of success, you could look at how are people feeling and what's their what's the state of kind of mental health generally. If we look at all of the investment over the last 6 to 10 years, nothing has moved the dial, and if anything, the health surveys have showed that experiences of depression, anxiety, and those symptoms have actually increased despite the increase in investment. So I don't know what people are saying is about what's the evidence that you're talking about in terms of what outcomes are you talking about, because they're not measuring what needs to be measured, and if we can get that right, it would be a great start.
It would be a great start. I think there's quite a few people in the room that would love to talk with you more on how we could go about measuring those things better.
Love to hear it.
We need to obviously wrap up this, otherwise you'll miss out on lunch, whānau. I do want to let people know that we have Minister Meager joining us this afternoon, and he will stay on for the happy hour. And so we have an hour of his time to pick up those conversations. I'm not sure if our other panellists are staying for lunch. Are you staying for lunch, Irene?
I don't think I was invited to happy hour.
I mean, friend, you're more than
Girl.
welcome, both of you. Come back for happy hour. Might not be so happy. No, we'll be happy. So yeah, we are able to do... I want to thank our panellists. I want to thank you so much for coming, for fronting to share the mātauranga that you have. The reality for our rangatahi at the moment, and the role of the youth development sector, and actually every day dealing with the reality and support our young people to navigate it. It's really helpful to know that you see that. We really want to be able to, in the positions that you have, to be able to see you influence and support you to influence as best you can to make that difference. I was supposed to ask one last question. You're only allowed 2 words. Final thoughts. What is the youth development sector's superpower? And that is the question, because you can't do the rest of it in 2 words. What is the youth development's superpower? Josiah's ready.
Tautoko and aroha.
Kia ora.
Everyone here and our collective power to organise.
Listening and understanding our taiohi.
Amplifying voice.
Kia ora. Okay, whānau, let's do a big round of applause for our panel. Thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next session after lunch.